What's going on, YouTube and Facebook? Don't mind me. I am going to set this up real quick. Then I'll get into the intro. We're live. We're live on everything on all platforms that I have essentially covered. Being said, welcome everybody to Ignite Thursday. Essentially what I've developed Ignite Thursday for is to come on here, answer any questions you guys may have, ultimately trying to help you reprogram your mind, rewire your mind, because ultimately your mind is what's going to help you ignite change into your life. And a lot of times, this is something I was thinking about this week, was the fact that, we don't really know why or realize that we have a problem. We see the side effects on different things, and we, again, don't think we have a problem. We think that maybe there's something else we can essentially just do to address those particular side effects and not actually go to the core of the problem and fix it, right? But before I get too much into that, I know I kind of want people to get into here a little bit more. So before I do that, I just wanted to let you guys know that the virtual races is something I am still doing. If you're interested in, you can look in the description below. If you're on YouTube, in my bio, if you're on Instagram, and start a virtual race with me. And then if you do have an Instagram account, tag me in those photos when you are running along with me. The nice thing about the virtual runs as well is that they plant a tree for every percentage ran for that particular race, which is nice. So you're kind of doing killing two birds with one stone. You're helping plant trees, and you are getting in shape for 2021 to make 2021 the best year ever. And that being said, I also do have the Ignite Mindset course, Master course, out now to help you ignite change into your life. And like I just talked about, we don't actually understand sometimes that we have underlying problems that we don't want to typically address because we like to project out onto the other problems and just essentially deal with the side effects, right? That are typically the stress, the anxiety, the depression that we deal with. And in seeing these side effects, right, not realizing that there is an underlying problem, and having that Ignite mindset helps dive deep, helps actually rewire you from the inside out to ignite the change that you want in your life. And this goes back to kind of the whole thing that I've talked about being an observer of your thoughts and how important that is, and understanding that, and trying to tie this into the theme tonight, which is actually your greatest investment. And you should understand, I did a lot of research a couple of years back. Let's go back even further than that, right? Let's go back to a time when I was younger. I went through technical school and all that for the military, did management school, did college and all that stuff, but I didn't really deep dive and educate myself on stuff. And when I was looking at doing investing on my own, right? I think I had watched a video or something about investments, like what is the greatest investment? What is the greatest investment? And one thing seemed to always be the norm, and that being that you should always invest in yourself, and not just in yourself, but in your mind. Know how the mind works, know how it can work to your benefit, right? Like, this is your greatest tool that you have been provided since day one. You've been building this tool out since you were a baby. But if you don't know how it works, if you don't have the instructions to this thing, right? This is why I live in through the experiences I have and all the research and applying these different tools, that I actually realize that, this tool can benefit you in many ways. You can change your life through your mindset. And as far as overreached as that seem, and I talk about that gap that we see other people and we see ourselves and we try to relate, which I talk about. You should never compare yourself, first of all, but ultimately understanding that you always look at the gap and think, well, that could never be who I am, because you paint the picture. And this also goes back into, well, who exactly are you? Are you who you're describing? Or are you describing the events in your life? Is that who you are? Are you the awareness of these things going on in your life, right? This goes back to being the observer of your life. But if you can be the observer of your life, you realize that you can fix your mindset and make that investment in yourself, make that investment in your mindset, and realize that if you can do this and work on this one tool, like you become, like unstoppable to a point. And as crazy as that may sound, right? Like I've done the work. I've rewired my brain to overcoming fear, to pushing comfort zones. Yes, is it still there? Yes, but these tools, they do help. And you realize that if you can build that investment in your mindset, it does take time, it does take effort. And I know a lot of times we don't want to hear that, right? A lot of times we don't want to put forth effort. We want instant results. And if I could give you an instant results and say, hey, all you have to do is swallow this pill, and then, you become essentially like limitless, right? Now, this is a great movie because it essentially portrays what this is like, what this feeling is like to become the observer of your thoughts, right? Because if you even know, watching that movie Limitless, you know how when you took the pill, like everything just came into full color. Everything just wasn't so dull anymore, right? This is what I talk about when I talk about like mindset and like optimizing your mindset, and in the fuel you ingest, it does this to your mind. You almost have like, you see full color, right? It's not like black and white anymore. Your life doesn't seem dull anymore. You seem energized and ready to go, and your mind is constantly going in a positive way, right? It's not like you're stressed out about stuff or anything like that. It's more like you're firing on all cylinders. And if you can fire on all cylinders, be an observer, and investing that time into doing this, you have ultimate control of your life and the direction of your life. And then at that point, it's more, okay, well, now that I have control of my mind, I have control of the most important tool in my life, where do I go from here? And that's kind of where I portray like the pillars and everything, right? That's why I talk about the pillars, because I'm like, well, these 3 pillars is what you can hit on to guide you once you have that mindset, right? Once you have that limitless mindset and knowing how the brain works, how the brain learns. And we don't get stuck on the gap. We're more worried about the destination as opposed to being stuck on the gap and not making the changes that we want in life, because we think that we can't do it because of our comfort zones, because of the fact that we're not comfortable with uncertainty. And this is where it could be really hard, right? And understand that if you can control the mind, right, this is your greatest investment in not knowing that. And when I was researching, the best investments, right? I wanted to know, what was the best investment, right? Can I invest in a stock? Can I invest in real estate? And it comes down to your mind. And why is that so important? Because I also relate this to the fact that, just imagine, right? All the things that you have in your life, all the material things, your cars, your real estate, whatever, your money, whatever, your investments, imagine it just all being gone one day. What are you left with? You're left with your mind. And if you know where to look, the resources to use, right? If you know how to calm yourself, to not stress yourself out, because when you're in situations like that, it's extremely important to be calm, to be mindful and focused on and driven on what you're trying to do. You can't do that in a stressful situation. And it's a lot of times I've talked about how, like in my life, where my life has kind of been reset, right? I think a lot of it's been self-inflicting to a point, but being said, I think it's also important to realize that if you can control the mind, you can allow yourself to, and know how it works, you can get yourself out of any rut, and realize that you don't need material things to help you do this, that you can reset to zero at any point in your life and be okay, be comfortable with yourself, right? That's like the ultimate like comfort level, is being able to get to a point in your life where you are the master of essentially your destination, right? You are the master of your life because you have control over the most important tool, which is your mind. And to be able to do that, let me turn on the comments, because if you are commenting, I can't see anything. I know if it's coming from Facebook, I know I had this issue before, so I do apologize if you are writing comments on Facebook and I can't see them. But controlling your mind, right? If you can reset, if you ever get reset back to zero, you know you're okay, right? That's where the confidence level comes in. That's why it's important to invest in the mind, because your confidence level comes from your mind and understanding what you're capable of, right? If you can build out the mindset to a point to understand, well, I'm capable of anything. I've seen myself, I have the track record because I've invested the time in my mind in building it out, and knowing the tools and where to look and how the mind works, how I learn, right? How does the mind actually learn things? How can I overcome stress so I'm calm and focused under those times, right? That people typically aren't. Because again, if you are stressed out, you're not going to make, typically there'll be more emotion involved, right? And this is why I talk about you need to be an observer of your emotions, thoughts, and ideas, because if you can essentially stand away from these different things, you realize that you have more control over your life. And it's not just, life isn't just given to you. You can dictate what you want in your life by controlling your mind and realizing how it works and optimizing that. And I know a lot of times, even like some of the things I do, like when I go and as far as like execution and stuff, not to toot my own horn, but I've noticed that I can execute on things that a lot of people may procrastinate on. And I was at that point where I procrastinated on a lot of different things, but now I've gotten to the point to where I've invested in how the mind works. And I realize that I know where to cut off. I look for triggers. I look for different things that's going to cause me to procrastinate and not allow me to execute and essentially change those things I need to change every single day. And to do that, I have to know how the mind works. I have to make that investment. And again, you're not going to find it in a pill. You're not going to find it in any everyday thing that is not going to help you, right? You're not going to find it in some product. You have to do the work. You have to work on, breathing techniques, right? It keeps you in the now, as opposed to worrying about what's going to happen or projecting in the future that things only get better when, or essentially worrying about the past that, well, I have this track record and it's never happened, so how could it ever, right? You have to, and I know sometimes it's hard to be a visual person. Some people aren't visual. I am a visual person, but trying to picture yourself in that way, that ultimate person that you want to be, right? How do you overcome procrastination when it's life-changing decisions? That's a good question. Ultimate thing is where are you trying to get in life? Right? Like, what is that destination in life? Ultimately, like, what are you seeking in life to make that life-changing decision, right? If you have a life-changing decision that you want to make, I would almost have to need more context, Melanie. But ultimately, if you're trying to make a big life-changing decision, you have to essentially understand, are you happy where you're at? If you're not happy where you're at, then you should already know the answer, right? And I talk about validation a lot. Like you seek validation from other people because you want to make that life-changing decision, but you want to make sure that you're right. And so you seek validation. But if it's a life-changing decision and you feel like things would be better, but you're afraid of where you're at now, career choice, I should say. As far as like a career choice, I guess ultimately, like, what do you procrastinate on? What are you worried about ultimately, as far as like a career choice? Is it the fear of success and what that could bring? Because a lot of people may not think of it as that way, or perhaps the fear of failure, which is a big thing. And I think that's one of the biggest things that you have to get over. The fact that you have to understand everybody's fearful of the actions that they take. And all it takes is for you to do it a couple times. The fear of failure, yeah, everybody always has that fear of failure. And ultimately what it is, if everybody fails, but you have to understand that this comes also in with the whole thought and the idea of fixed versus growth mindset, right? You think if you're going to fail, that's it. That's the end of it, right? But you have to understand that you have to fail a lot. You essentially need practice, right? Like anything in life that we have, right? If you're going to learn to walk or anything like that, you have to become comfortable with failure. So how do you do that? You practice failing to get better, to do anything, to walk better, to write better, to become better at sports, anything like that. You have to continue to do it to be comfortable with failure. And then once you build up that track record, once you have that reference point that, hey, I've overcome failure before, I'm okay with it. I know that it's just a learning experience. And you have to understand that a lot of times you project that, well, people are going to make fun of me because I don't know what I'm talking about. And, I'm a good example of that, right? Like I could come on here and say stuff and people may not agree with me. Some people haven't agreed with me, right? But again, it's just an opinion, someone else's opinion. And if you are fearful of someone else's opinion, that means you don't hold your own opinion. Your own opinion should hold more value over anything, right? It is your view of life, right? Nobody should be able to dictate that your view on life is wrong, right? People will, but that shouldn't stop you from doing what you feel is right, or going after a career or something that you've always wanted to do. You should never be fearful of it, but you have to make the leap. If you don't make the leap and start putting into action, you won't overcome the fear, the procrastination. And to overcome the procrastination, you have to eliminate the thought, right? And the thought is the fear, because you're projecting in the future what you think is going to happen, but it's not really happen, right? It's not in existence, right? It's just a projection. And this is what your mind does. Your mind likes to project the fear so you don't do it, to keep yourself safe. And so to do that, you have to try to eliminate thought. And the best way to do that is to have a schedule, particular whatever it is. Like for you, Melanie, ultimately, like if there is like writing or coming on camera or anything like that, is to just schedule it in, block the time. And then when it comes to it, you kind of eliminate that thought, right? The thought of fear and stuff. You're like, okay, now is the time I got to do it. So you just jump in and start doing it. And a lot of times, as soon as you start doing, you'll feel like that panic attack coming on, right? Like, oh, I can't do this. I can't do this. And as soon as you do that, right? The first time is going to be hard, but you want to make it consistent too. You don't want to just do it one time and then let a couple of days go, right? If you can go to a point and continue to push yourself, right, every single day, as long as you keep it consistent, it becomes your new comfort level. And this is why I talk about expanding that comfort level and pushing it out. Because if you can make it a daily consistent thing, you are making you're making that your comfort level. And then before you know it, whatever it is, like if you are trying to get on camera and talk about or reading or podcasting or anything like that to share your stories, you become comfortable and you get on there, and then the normal person that you are, right? Because when you first get on, you're like, oh my gosh, well, what are people going to think about me? And it's not going to happen, right? And again, if you schedule it in and then just execute when it comes, initially it's going to be hard. The second time will be a little bit easier than the first time, but that's why you don't want to have a gap in between the first and second time. You want to keep going back to back to back. Make it a regular routine. And you realize once it's routine, then it becomes easier. And I notice even when I do lives, because before I was doing lives like twice a week, and it was this routine, like I'd come on and it'd be a lot easier. Now that it's like once a week, it's like, okay, now I got to kind of warm up the engine a little bit. So you want to keep the consistency there. As long as that consistency is there, you can continue to expand this. And this also is about, it's like going to the gym, right? It's like consistency in the gym. If you take a day off isn't going to hurt. Sometimes you need a day off. Sometimes you need that mental break. But ultimately, to be able to expand that zone, you're going to have to be consistent with it every single day. Execute on as much as possible, right? You're trying to win the war, not the battle, right? You're going to lose some battles here and there. That's okay. But as long as you're winning the war, as long as you're winning the majority of the time, that is all that matters. And that will help you overcome the fear and get to that point to where it's comfortable. And then you realize it when you start having this newfound comfort level, you kind of start challenging yourself a little bit more to expand a little bit more, because you have track record, right? You have a point of reference. Ultimately, what you're trying to do is build a point of reference. Once you have that point of reference, then you allow yourself to start exploring more. And depending on where you're coming from in life, right? Like some people, they don't like being social, right? That particular case, I would say, well, hey, you know what you can do is go into like-minded groups. Then you have something to talk about, right? And that kind of just gets you naturally just talking to somebody to the point where like, okay, well, now I'm out in public, I'm able to talk more. And so you start expanding in that way. So that gets you more out to being more social. And so you just got to kind of trick your brain, right? Because your brain is always fighting against you. Your brain is trying to keep you safe. And by safe, right, it's trying not to get you embarrassed or anything like that. And that's where the fear comes from, because you're afraid you're going to say the wrong thing. But you have to realize that you will say the wrong thing. That's okay, right? I can't come on here and dot my I's and cross my T's, right? I can't even talk. You can't do that all the time. You're not going to be 100% all the time. But in time, with consistency, you'll get better. You have to be okay with failure. The more, again, comfortable you are with failure, the better you get. And the more you can expand that zone and start incorporating more things in your life. And then, like I said, it becomes like a challenge, right? This becomes like you essentially gamify this expanding of your zone, right? It's like, well, how far can I push it this time? What can I do new here to push it? And then again, even like for me, going live and everything like that, right? Like I've expanded it out to that point, and then it's pushing it a little bit more. Okay, what can I do next, right? Like, can I do live events? Can I do all these other things, right? You try to expand it more. And that's why I'm doing like all three. So I got like 3 different social networks I'm on here talking about, right? Which is different because I've never had 2 different cameras pointing at my face. But being said, right, you want to get to that point where you can do it, right? And it's essentially baby stepping it. That initial shock, I do have overcoming fear video. I did a recent updated one where I talked about my first Instagram video and how hard that was. But it's just getting it out there. And then you realize all that pent up thoughts and ideas that you had about how horrible life was going to be after the fact that you uploaded that video. You realize that it's really not that bad. And then once you start getting out there, even myself, right? I've been doing this for a couple years on YouTube anyway. And even at that point, it hasn't gotten to the point to where like I've had a lot of people come on and say, hey, you're saying stuff wrong. I've had a couple of people, but you build it up. So at that point you're like, okay, well, I know I'm going to make mistakes. That's fine. I'm trying to always do better. You're always trying to get better. Let's say, should you just have the next step plan or any overall goal plan? How many of your processes should you have planned? I talk about this, and this is something your mind likes to do, right? I talk about the destination, path, and duration. Your brain likes to try to predict these things. So anytime you think about something you want to achieve in your life, your brain's like, okay, well, how long is it going to take to get there? What am I going to, what kind of path do I have to take to get there? And a lot of times we like to think it's A to B, but it's not, right? We have to just focus on the destination. This is what I want in my life. I don't care what it takes. I don't care what path it's going to take, because it's not going to be a straight shot. That's why you can't come on here. I can't come on here and say, hey, you got to do steps 1 through 5. And this is going to be what's going to give you success into whatever it's going to be, right? Like you are going to have tools that are going to help you to get to your destination. But understanding that you should only focus on your destination. And when you start thinking about, well, how am I going to get there? Just worry about getting started. And if you're going to think about, well, how long is this going to take? Because after a while, you start to get tired of, well, this is taking too long, right? We live in that society now where you want instantaneous results, right? If it's not happening, it's never going to happen. You have to understand that to grow an oak, it takes time, right? You can't water it for a couple of weeks and then try to rip it out of the ground, because it's not going to get big and strong. You have to be okay with whatever the duration is. Maybe it will come sooner than you think it is. Maybe it will take a lot longer. But your ultimate goal is to focus on the destination, right? You have to realize too that we want to live. We have to. You hear that saying all the time about enjoy the journey. And this is extremely important because that is where the fun is. The fun is in the learning. The fun is in the traveling to the destination. The destination will always change. You realize this, that a lot of times if you have a goal in life, say you're trying to get a degree or something like that, and you're like, once I get to this point, life is just going to be so much better. And you get to that point, and it's not so much better, right? You have to enjoy the challenge of the journey. You have to get to that point where you're comfortable with that. And that's why I talk about like expanding zones and stuff. Like you get to a point where you gamify it, and it's fun to like, okay, well, I've met this point. What's my next destination? How am I going to get there, right? It's like trying to be strategic about how you get there, and loving the process, and being okay again with, it doesn't matter how long it's going to take. It doesn't matter the path. It's not saying that, you get to this point and maybe the destination really isn't something that you like. And that's why I talk about like perspective and stuff, right? Like you should always be trying to educate yourself on new perspectives, new books and stuff that can help open your mind to different things. And then maybe you start something. It's not saying to start and drop something all the time, but if there's something that you really, really want in your life, you're like, man, this is something that would be awesome and something I want to incorporate in my life, then just worry about the destination. But if there's something that you do and you're like, nah, this isn't really something I like, right? Like you typically tell, at least go for a couple of weeks, right? And then be like, oh, well, this isn't really something I like. And then find something else. But ultimately, if you are like, this is something I can't live without in my life, there's something I really, right? Like I talk about, everybody has a song inside them, right? That they want to share with the world. Try to share that, right? When you know what it is, you know what that thing is, you know what that value is that you bring to the world, right? Deep down. Honestly, so if it's delayed, oh, there we are, we're back. Ultimately you want to focus on the destination. And again, don't worry about all other things. Just realizing it's going to be a learning path and being okay with that. You have to go back to being okay with failure and being okay. You're realizing that you will fail and you'll fall on your face many times, but that's okay because you just understanding that you're growing, you're learning along the way. That's okay. Everybody does that. You don't have a fixed mindset, right? You can expand past that and get to where you want to get in life by continuing to be consistent with it and focusing on that destination. And again, being okay with that. So does that help answer your question, Melanie? I don't know if Melanie is still on here or she's the person that dropped off. But ultimately, those are great questions. I mean, those are a lot of things people, are held back on is fear in comfort zone and realizing that you have to be consistent with it, right? Don't get stuck on the procrastination. It's just, again, if you can block it out, just execute. Because if it's blocked out, if it's scheduled in, then initially you might have some kind of like anxiety and stuff building up. Okay, well, I got this coming up at this time and I got to get it done. And then, so try to eliminate thought and just do it, right? The best, as soon as that thought comes to your mind, just try to eliminate it, start getting up and moving, right? If you start like moving, this is one thing has helped me a lot, is as soon as that thought comes up, well, I should probably just get up, stand up, and just go start doing it. So if you have a block off, just go start doing it. And I've done that many times where I've just been exhausted and don't want to do it. But that's the best way to do it. When that thought comes to your mind or that time frame comes up, and this is how people become so proficient and become very and eliminate the procrastination is by blocking out. They block out their whole day, right? The most people that are most efficient in their life, they block out things in chunks of time, right? And they stick to those chunks. And so that way they don't bleed over into the next one. I know life happens and sometimes you got to incorporate different things into your schedule that will allow that flexibility. But ultimately what you want to do is, again, just block it. This is what I want in my life. I don't care how long it's going to take. I don't care the path, because I know there's no simple A to B. There's no steps 1 through 5. I know I'm going to have to learn to teach myself along the way. And that's kind of the fun part, because this is why I talk about following your curiosity, right? Maybe you find something, you have that destination in mind. Maybe you find something along that path that you're like, well, this is really interesting. I didn't know this was part of this. And so you kind of go that way, and and see, this is also where it helps with the procrastination, because if you kind of follow that curiosity onto the destination, you're like, okay, well, maybe I want to start writing a book. So I start writing a book, and you're like, well, how do I exactly publish it on Amazon? So you go, follow your curiosity, and you start doing this. You're like, whoa, this is really cool. And then it starts motivating you to want to do it more. You start finding these things, right? You find these pockets of motivation along your destination, and you realize, because motivation is always temporary. So if you're doing it this way, you find the pockets of motivation that allow you to override the procrastination. Because initially, yeah, there'll be a lot of procrastination because you're trying to change a pattern that is already part of your life. And in rewiring your brain and all these different things, you have to realize that to be able to do that, it's going to be, anything is painful when it involves your brain and rewiring, right? Because your brain doesn't like the change, but it can be changed. And then once you do it often and routinely, like I suggest you do, then it becomes part of your normal. Then you're just doing it fluidly without even thinking about it. And that's where you want to be, right? And that's why I talk about comfort zones and stuff, because it's new to you. You like that comfort zone, right? Pushing out, you're comfortable with the fear, you're comfortable with expanding your comfort zone. And so it does still happen. It never 100% goes away, but you get excited about it, right? It drives you, it motivates you to want to do more and see what more you're capable of. So with that, that was a great question. It took off the whole thing, but that's fantastic, because that's what I wanted to do this Ignite Thursdays for, is for answering questions. So I do have a theme, but ultimately I want to have people come on here and ask questions and then help them out the best that I can. And then one thing I did want to bring up too, that kind of goes along with the greatest, well, your greatest investment is the mind, but ultimately understand that, a lot of times we get stuck up. I've been reading this book on, it's essentially based off of choices, right? Like nowadays we live in a life that has so many different choices that we get stuck up on things. And it can kind of lead into Melanie's question here about having a destination in mind, right? And the fact that we have so many different choices in our life. Where before, if you grow up in my day and age, right, like you didn't have choice. Like it was either black and white. You either had it or you didn't. Now you have so many different varieties of different things, right? You get stuck up on choice that you start procrastinating. And so to eliminate procrastination, you need to eliminate choice, right? I think that's the biggest thing, is you get stuck up on the different choices that, well, I can do this. Oh, should I write it for Amazon, or should I do a hardcover? Just get started. Just do it. Just don't even think about where it's going to go. You have to have a book first. So just start the action that will help get you there. And so if you can eliminate the choices and keep it simple, right? It's all the best way to be most efficient at anything, eliminate procrastination and all these other different things, is to keep it simple, eliminate the choices in your life, because we are overwhelmed with choices in our lives. And I think that's why even like on videos, on YouTube videos, people will click off all the time, because, if it's not holding essentially your attention, you can click off to something else that will. And then when that video for 2 minutes doesn't, you click off to something else, right? We have too much choice, where before you had to show up at, Thursday at 9 o'clock, Friends or something would come on, and then you could watch it, right? At that point, you didn't have a choice. You had to be there or you missed it. Now, stuff could be recorded. Now you can just watch it whenever you want, right? Now you have an unlimited amount of choice. Remove the choice from your life. This also dives into a thing I talk about, energy management and stuff, right? You have to realize that anything you are choosing that you have to essentially give energy to when you make a choice, this depletes your energy level for the day. So if there's a mad variety of choices, which we're all bombarded with every single day, this is going to drain your energy levels. This is why, like I talk about unplugging and stuff, and removing stuff out of your life that doesn't need to be there, because any choice that you make essentially will drain life from those things that you want, right? Like maybe you have a destination in mind that you want to get to. You have to understand that to be able to get to that destination, you want to eliminate some of the choices, right? You can get bombarded and then start procrastinating. eliminate choice. This is the destination I want. What do I have to do? First step is get started. Just start doing it. The rest you can find out later, right? I've always talked about, you need to, that ready, fire, aim, right? You want to fire, you want to just get out and start doing the action. You can refine the process later. Because you realize that you're never going to be ready. You're never going to have everything, your ducks in a row. It's never going to happen. If you're waiting for that day, again, you're future projecting. Well, and at this point, I'll be ready. You'll never be ready. There's never a good time. Just start executing on it. And then eventually you'll refine that process. And then you can go to the next person and someone's like, hey, I want to learn how to write a book. How do you write a book? Well, good thing you asked, because I have people on Instagram. But that is pretty much it. If anybody has any questions, I have one viewer. I don't know if that's you, Melanie, or not. If there's any other questions, this is getting pretty long. I don't want to make this video too long, or also take a long time to upload. But if there is no other questions, I want to thank everybody for coming on Discover Ignites. Again, every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I come on here, answer questions, have a theme. If nobody is here, I try to help teach you guys and help you essentially ignite change that you want into your life. And that's ultimately what I'm here for. It's what Discover Ignites for, is to ignite the change. But if that's it, if there's no other questions, I want to thank you guys for your time, because I know time is the most valuable thing that you have, and I appreciate you spending it with me. So until next time, guys, I will see you guys later.